Thank you first to our hosts, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to our panelists, to our great audience. We're here today to talk about a really important topic, minerals' contributions to society from rule takers to rule shapers, ESG moving beyond box ticking to reflect supplier countries. I am Rahim Bapu, and on behalf of BMO Capital Markets, which is the largest underwriter of metals and mining equities in North America, we wanted to talk about this topic. Now, in our role as an underwriter, we've recognized for a long time that mining companies are businesses that focus on coordination and coordinating the world's access to its mineral wealth. That coordination involves stakeholders, communities, indigenous people, regulators, workers, and of course shareholders. And one of the things that we've observed over time is, in general, the better companies are at tailoring that coordination to the communities in which they operate and their specific circumstances, the more access to capital they'll have and the better their license will be to go on and continue accessing that mineral wealth. This panel is one that we want to explore that topic a little bit more in. And maybe to start, I'll go directly to Dino. One of the things that we hear about ESG when we think about that as a topic is the idea that it might be a cost to doing business. You have a particular interest in that view of the world, and at Fortescue you think about things a little bit differently. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Thanks, Ryan. We certainly do think about it a bit differently. And first off, thank you to the Kingdom for the FMF. It's an amazing event, and certainly as an organisation, we thank you for all the contribution you've put into this. So at Fortescue, we have an ambition aligned with the 2030 future vision here of ridding ourselves from hydrocarbons. And for us, from the very outset 2 years ago, this plan had to be economic from the start. The technology didn't exist at that point holistically, and in taking some risk, we've been able to demonstrate through the offset of nearly 1 billion litres of diesel in our mining operations, we are actually value accretive in the capital that we've deployed in becoming real zero by 2030, and we're happy to say we are actually on track. And that means completely changing the way that we do business in an open-cut iron ore mine.
Randy, I'm curious, your business model doesn't involve operatorship at all. Dino talked a little bit about implementing technologies. That's not really something you do. Is ESG something that applies to your business?
ESG, well, first off, thanks for being here, an honor. ESG it applies to everyone. It's a responsibility of everyone, right? And so you're right. Wheaton Precious Metals doesn't operate mines, we invest into mines. But we've long taken the belief that doesn't exclude us from the responsibility of making sure that there's good benefits delivered back to those impacted stakeholders, those communities around the mine sites that are being generous enough to share that resource abundance with us. And so, I really do think it was just over 10 years ago that we kick-started a campaign of co-funding programs, even though we're not the operator. And I think that momentum it has definitely moved forward. It's something that I encourage everyone. There's a lot of service providers out there that do very well by the operators, but they're also looking for ways to co-invest back into community programs and improve their own ESG performance, their own sustainability performances and stuff like that. And so, just over 10 years ago, we kick-started a program, and we were the first in the streaming and royalty space, and the first sort of third-party entity to actually step up and put money on the front lines in terms of pushing forward sustainability initiatives. And it shouldn't stop at us, to be honest, all the way down to the consumer. We all benefit from the efforts that happen at these operations. We all benefit from communities that are generous enough to share that mineral wealth with the rest of the world. And so it's just something that's done very well for us, and I've seen that grow to the point of now it's a standard item on any streaming and royalty financing is what kind of a commitment are you going to make to helping co-fund community programs? We're seeing it. What I'm perhaps most proud of is the entire peer group is now following that path, and we're also seeing even equipment suppliers and service providers step up and actually put money back into that. We're all reaping benefits from these operations, and so we definitely we have a responsibility to make sure that we deliver back to that side. So it's an approach that's worked very well for us, and I think, to be honest, as a society, this is an approach that we all need to consider.
And I'm curious, Dino talked about how changing his mindset and having an economic rationale around thinking through ESG has direct returns for Fortescue shareholders. Do you see that in your approach as well?
Well, it's tough to have that direct connection because we're not the operators itself, but we have an overlying mantra at Wheaton, and I would say that any partnership, it's not just Wheaton, but any successful partnership, the stronger our partners are, the stronger we are. That's what a good, strong partnership is. And so this is only one of the programs that we do to try and deliver value after the original financing transaction, to try and help our partners be stronger and better at their job. And that pays dividends just in terms of we're all part of a bigger business environment, and our whole focus at Wheaton is to be a positive partner, and that leaves a track record that brings back repeat business. In the end, Wheaton is a service company. We supply capital to the mining industry, but we supply it from an equity perspective. We take project risk. But building that strong partnership and being a strong leader in that and helping our partners be stronger means that we get repeat customers coming back. In the last 2 years, we've done 10 transactions. 7 of them have been with people that we've dealt with. 5 of them were non-competitive. They just wanted to come back and work with Wheaton to grow that relationship, and that's a real objective. And so there's definitely downstream benefits to this. It's just common business sense. It makes sense.
Wow, 70% repeat business. That's pretty measurable.
Yeah.
Sean, maybe bringing you in here. Dino talked a little bit about accessing technologies and how you build new projects. You've got a number of new projects at Valley Base Metals that you're thinking about. How are you thinking about ESG and implementation in your context?
Yeah, I think really through a strict social license and value creation lens and risk lens. So, if you think about it, we've got a vertically integrated global nickel platform. We're ramping 3 projects this year up to full production, including Salobo 3, which we're finalizing. But I'd say I look at it really through a very clear risk and value lens. We're in a very competitive market in nickel, for example. We have to explore better. We've got to get our cost structures down, and we need to be as productive as we possibly can. And with the rate of advance of technology, we've got these centralized systems, these monitoring systems, which are a lot more cost-effective, AI interfaces, and the ability to see what we can do to enhance that competitiveness. At the same time, it's really also about partnerships. So you have to partner with your communities and your host governments to have the opportunity to do what we do. If you do that badly, you lose your social license. That can be catastrophic. And I think as we look at partnerships, we look at technology and that. Bécancour, we've been advancing with General Motors in Pakistan, the first nickel sulfate facility out there, which is advancing well. We did a lot of work with our host communities and First Nations in order to get that social license in the first place. There's a great example with Stobie Pit in Sudbury, which has allowed us to partner with the First Nations and others and the union to be able to bring that online in a cost-effective way and add to our capacity. So I see it as an ecosystem. It's not a cost of doing business. It's an essential part of doing business for us.
Frank, Sean's projects are about some of the very important battery metals. I think the battery metal that's probably the most celebrated is lithium, and Tianqi is a very important, very large producer of the world's lithium. It has often been noted that the production of lithium can involve some significant costs environmentally. Is that a contradiction when you think about enabling the world's energy transition? How is Tianqi thinking about that?
Yeah, I know. Okay. So, I mean, any kind of operations and any kind of explorations are related with the technologies and then the powers, and then you will have to do any production, you will consume energy. So this is for sure. But we look at the ESG program saying that we have to reach a net zero target in year 2050 or something. And then what we can do is, this is a target, but during the time of production, we will have to try our best to reduce the consumption of the energies. For example, like us, that we both have in the quarries, in the mines, and also the converting plant, that we have a target that we are doing, for example, in the scope 1, 2, 3, that we, in year 2030, that we promised that we will have to reduce 50% of the emissions through the ways that we are using renewable energy, green powers, and then responsible requisitions and all these kind of practice regarding to ESG that we are doing, that we spend a lot of effort, and then we try to optimize the supply chain effect. That we believe this is something not related only with one point or one part of the whole supply chain, but each player has to spill over to each other. So we believe we cannot say that is a contradiction, that is a requirement and an order that we will have to, in what way that we can reach the target at the same time that we will have to reduce the consumption of the energy.
And I'm curious on that topic. We're seeing some of the players in the lithium space begin to specifically market their product as green lithium. Are you seeing a pull from customers asking for triple and quadruple green lithium?
I mean, we cannot say, but I believe the 100% green product, I mean, green lithium does not exist, at least what is 11 o'clock today? So we say that we see a lot of players and they are trying, like us, everybody's trying our best to make it as green as possible, step by step. Yeah.
Dino, maybe on that note, even more than lithium, iron ore, and specifically low-grade iron ore, has been identified as a significant culprit of the reason that steel emissions are such a large percentage of global emissions. Fortescue is a very large producer of that low-grade iron ore, and you noted you were net zero on scope 1 and 2, which is very impressive, but what about the product you're producing?
Yeah, it's a great point, and just correction, real zero by 2030, quite a distinction. 98% of the emissions in the creation of steel actually come from our scope 3. So our product is burnt with coal, predominantly in China, to make steel. Yes, and you're right, low grade is not the current choice for hydrogen-based reduction. The reality is 97% of the world's known reserves of iron ore do not meet a green pathway. So for us, technology and disruption to technology is the enabler. And I'm certainly of the opinion that humans will be able to solve this. In fact, our own project will demonstrate by the end of this year that low-grade fines out of the Pilbara, it will be possible to use hydrogen economically to reduce that to make a 95% green metal, the first of its kind. We announced that just on a year ago, and many have come along that pathway. For me, it's just about time now where people will develop the technology to demonstrate that low grade can also be able to produce green steel. At the moment, it's only very, very high grades that are not available in significant volumes in order to make that green metal. 10% of the world's total emissions comes from the steel industry. So if 2050 or 2040 or 2030 is going to be real, and I applaud the Chinese for leading the way in this. So they're deploying nearly $1 trillion a year on the energy transformation, eclipses everyone else's activity. We have to solve steel. And I think we're well positioned for that.
You know, who's going to invest in developing that technology? Is it startups? Is it mining companies? Who's going to do that?
Look, my view and our experience is there is significant capital available to invest in technology infrastructure. I know our organization is putting money where our mouth is, between a $50 and $100 million investment in the R&D specifically. The largest steel mills in the world have mobilized nearly 10,000 engineers just focused on this over the last 5 to 10 years. So for me, it's not about who's going to, it's already happening. Here in the kingdom, there's already announcements made with some of those major steel mills on using that exact technology. So for me, that ship's already sailed. It's now about turning that technology, scaling them up, getting the cost of the electricity down. Again, we're seeing that here in the kingdom, the technology coming out of China. It's now certainly within everybody's reach. And our organization, based on the entrepreneurial culture we have, we want to go first. And the other thing about that is we're okay with banking on some of that technology, which will develop. You're seeing we're only at the start of an exponential increase in the productivity and efficiencies you're getting out of energy transition technologies.
Can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by banking on that increase?
Yeah, sure. So we were criticized heavily about the transformation of our mining fleet from a typical diesel haul pack to a fully electric or green machine. We have over 700 bits of gear. There's multiple thousand pieces of gear. In fact, here in the car park coming in, there are 2 suppliers which have a battery electric fleet available. When we first started this work, the charging chemistry and the battery chemistry only allowed 10, 20-minute run cycles, which is a little bit of a joke, really, when you're talking about mining. Our first generation will be just shy of diesel parity, and our second generation, which will be the majority of our fleet, will actually improve on the economics of the current available diesel fleet. So coming back to my first statement, it's actually a no-brainer to go electric now.
Wow, that's a really powerful example. Sean, Dino talked a little bit about investments by the kingdom in this area. One of the kingdom's investments was in Vale Base Metals itself, and you've talked and others have talked, speculated about the possibility of raising even more capital to execute on your growth strategy. I'm curious, how do you think about social license impacting your ability to raise that capital?
Yeah, look, I think the first thing that attracted me to this opportunity, it's been 3.5 months, is really the quality of the endowment and the portfolio and the potential that it has. So the highest and best use of our immediate time here, we have assets that others would like to own. And our ability to be able to allocate that capital, run it as efficiently as possible is priority one, to unlock value for Manara as well as for our major shareholder, Vale. Once we get to a stage where we've been able to achieve that, the question then is, and this will be a question of markets and our shareholders, I think there's discipline, having built a company recently and IPO'd it, in running a business in that way, because you have to run it in a way which will ensure that you've got the highest quality operations, you've got the social license, in order to at least set you up for the maximum degrees of freedom, whether our owners at the end of the day decide to continue with the status quo, IPO it, or do some sort of other transaction at that time. It's the path that maximizes your discipline and your degrees of freedom commercially at that point in time. And I found previously, and I would think that for Manara and certainly for Vale, it's not just about the ore body quality, it's the management team, it's how you actually become a partner of choice, how you do the right things from a social license point of view, that will maximize your access to an investor base which they may choose to leverage at that time. because our growth options, when I look in the 5 to 10 year horizon, and we have a significant challenge and opportunity ahead of us to maximize our copper endowment, for example, in Brazil, is really the ability to not only execute, but we'll hit a point where what's the right way to go beyond self-funding and possibly need further investment at that time.
Frank, Sean's starting on this journey. You've been down the journey on investing in assets around the world. Some of those have gone really well. Others have had challenges, whether SQM and the situation with Codelco or the FIAC legislation that's currently occurring at Greenbushes, startup at Kwinana. I'm curious, is there a unifying thought that you have as it relates to ESG? Is Tianqi still going to be in the business of investing abroad? Do you think about investing in the kingdom? Is there a read-through that we need to be thinking about?
Yeah. Once we mentioned talking about the ESG, most of the time that people are thinking is environment and then society. But it's important, like this morning when we have the breakfast session, and then the minister and or other officials from the kingdom have mentioned that what is more important that for you guys than to come to invest. The thing is, apart from E and S, governance is also very important. And we can say when a place is an investment destination, and then what we ask for is the legal system has to be sufficient, and then the protections of the property right, and then the compliance and the governance has to be really, really healthy. And this, apart from like in Australia, the perfect environment, compliance and everything, and like in Chile, a lot of opportunities, and then the lithium mines and salars. As you mentioned, that there are some challenges that we are facing, that we are determined that to solve the crisis of the G part of ESG, which is governance and compliance.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I'm curious actually on that topic, Randy. You know, you're an investment company in a lot of ways. This session is about whether ESG is box ticking. Is ESG a box you tick along an investment spectrum, or do you think about it differently?
No, most definitely not a box to tick. It's a core part. Without successful progress in ESG, you don't have an operation. You need to have, you know, a longer dated word is social license. You need to have that support all the way across. You need to have good structure that has that support. And I would actually argue that in today's world, with the growing access to social media venues and that communities actually have more accessibility and more power, more influence than they've ever had. And so it's not something that you can back away from. It's something you need to embrace. And you know, most good business practices have that already as part of their foundation. You don't get to where we are without having a proper respect for that and making sure that. And so for our perspective, and one of the most challenging things as a streaming company is that, you know, there's no, we don't operate the asset, so we have to make our decisions early on based on those parameters going forward. And so we all owe it to our shareholders to own our decisions. So we don't rely on a partner's promises or plans or whatever. We need to do detailed, deep due diligence. And our really, probably about 10 years ago or 8 years ago, we started including a social scientist as part of our due diligence team. And we now, that is an important component of our own programs. It's not just geologists and engineers that have had experience running projects. You have a dedicated person that focuses on community strength and community risk in that sense. And even then, when we're visiting a site, you can't just rely on the community members that the potential partner introduces you to, because they're always going to be introducing you to their friends in the community. And so, you know, we've taken to now also using outside consultants that get a deeper sense from the back door in terms of the community to make sure that we're not seeing a biased opinion on how that community support is in place. And I would say that's probably one of the biggest changes is that You know, we have governance risk, we have regulatory risk in terms of making these investments, but community risk is actually a bit different. And you can't just sort of sit there and think that a certain jurisdiction is favorable for investing into. You got to make sure that the community has buy-in on this and take this going forward. And it's an excellent exercise because what we learn through that quite often will help our partners be more successful, assuming we go forward with the transaction. And that combined with the fact that our teams visit so many mine sites around the world, we're always looking for ways to deliver extra value to our partners, and we see a lot of best practices and a lot of worst practices. We always make sure that our partners understand what we've seen and learned around the world to help them be better on that front. But it is something, I mean, it really comes down to owning the decision, making sure that you do the deep dive, and it's a necessary component of good business practices. So it's a core part of our business plan and our partners.
I couldn't think of a better way to end the session than to hear that advice. And as the kingdom embarks on its own journey with respect to accessing its mineral wealth, I think hearing all of the advice that's come out of the panelists on the stage will be very helpful. Thank you again to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to the audience, and to our great panelists. And we'll leave you to the next session.